Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again to the next episode in the series. In the last episode, we, I guess, fully implemented or converted our application from a two activity application to one activity and two fragments, and everything works as expected and, basically where we left it when it was just in the activity base. Or the activity style. So I just mentioned that we were going to maybe clean some things up here today, and I just wanted to briefly introduce the idea of base classes. And I mean, we've kind of been doing it inherently here by extending fragment for our fragments or extending activity for our activity, and that's because, these Android classes are, the base classes for a particular component in the system. But something that we can do as, project owners is create, more or less your own native base class that is going to provide some shared functionality to all of your, classes that will eventually extend it. So because we have two fragments here and they both are housed within the main activity, one little thing that we do pretty frequently is we actually reference the activity field, or I guess it's actually a function, but we reference getting the activity and casting it as the main activity in both this list fragment and this detail fragment. So I kind of just want to maybe consolidate that functionality into a single location, and then kind of show you a little bit of the power of implementing your own base class. So we're going to say, let's say base main activity fragment. And so this is actually going to essentially sit between our detail fragment and or these two fragments and the Android base class fragment. So we're going to go ahead and have our fragment have this extend our fragment, and then we're actually going to go ahead and have this extend we're going to say layout ID int, and we will pass in our layout ID. We're going to actually just convert these to say base main activity fragment. Excuse me, sorry, we're making this abstract. And then we're going to go ahead and also change our list fragment to also be that. And then within here, it's going to be quite simple, but we're just going to reference our activity. So instead of calling it activity, we'll call it main activity. And that equals, say by lazy, we'll set this to be the main activity. So now at the root level of our fragments, we have a reference to the main activity. And so instead of having to constantly cast this everywhere, we can actually just, call our main activity dot. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing here. I guess anywhere that this exists, but it also exists here. I'm just going to make sure I didn't forget any. Wonderful. And then if we run it, we should be all good. Okay. So considering everything's working, considering we have the data, considering we haven't crashed or anything along those lines, we can tell that it's actually working. And so the best way to look at this, if you're not too familiar with inheritance, is we've defined this as an abstract class, meaning that you need to extend this object here, this fragment. You can't actually just create an instance of it here. You can't just say, what is it called? Base. You can't just go ahead and like create it like you normally would. You can't create an instance of an abstract class, but what you can do is you can have other classes, your what they call implementation classes or implementation fragments, extend this class. So now you can say that both the detail fragment and the list fragment are still fragments, but they're actually still both base main activity fragments. So I guess if there's a couple other things that we could, maybe we could reference like the list in here. But I guess for a primitive introduction, the most obvious thing to do was, the activity a function that just returns whatever fragment activity the fragment is a part of, and casting it to the main activity is kind of just something that we did in both of these fragments, so we can kind of consolidate all of that into one location. And I guess if we were to add more fragments and whatnot, and we wanted to, or we knew that it was going to be a part of this main activity, we could have that new fragment extend base main activity fragment, and then you would have this little bit of functionality provided to you. But it's also very possible that let's say we want to set the toolbar title, and we will accept title as a string, support action bar, title equals title, right? And so now in the few locations where we set this title, instead of doing it that way, we can take set toolbar title, and we'll just name it that, and then EPL home, right? And then if we just rerun things, everything should work as expected. We have EPL home, and then we have club overview, right? So this is just a primitive way to show some base functionality that you would maybe want in a variety of your fragments or a variety of your classes, that just makes sense within the context of, okay, this is a fragment, and specifically it's a main activity fragment. So, we're going to know that when we're trying to reference the activity, that we're going to really be trying to reference the main activity. So we're just going to want that, little extra helper that exists there. And then, because it's a fragment, we're going to do something with toolbar title. And then you can get real fancy with it and figure out a better way to maybe, I don't know, denote some of this stuff, or handle certain callbacks or something along those lines. But it's pretty bare bones as is, so there's not too much more that you can do with it. But hopefully you can imagine that, as the application were to grow, as there were to be more dependencies, or as there were to be more functionality within each screen, having some kind of base functionality here could just be super helpful. I mean, even if it's just literally a simple way to toast something, and instead of having to write all of this out, in every one of your fragments, if you wanted to just toast something very quickly, you could toast it by literally just calling toast and saying hello, or whatever the case is. So hopefully you get the point here. I don't want to continue to beat a dead horse, but yeah, boom, there you go. It could be helpful if you maybe want to have a central location to log things or something along those lines. But anyway, hopefully you get the idea here, and then you can continue to layer this as much as you would want, and maybe your implementation fragment is really 3 or 4 fragments or 3 or 4 classes removed from Android's base fragment, and each layer along that chain you kind of add more functionality to the fragment for different reasons. So that will be for a later date, but hopefully this just provides a little bit of an insight into a traditional or a pretty common pattern of building these base fragment classes, or maybe even at the activity level, building yourself a base activity class that then extends the app.compat activity, and it has just general activity-based helper functions or data available to it at that point. So Yeah. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one.